Hey everybody, welcome. Thanks for joining. I know we have a few people filing in. I'll give it a couple seconds. I just wanted to say hello to Ken Happenstall, who's here with us from the Colorado BOCES Association. Ken, good to see you.
Yeah, thanks. It's great to be here, Corey.
Excellent. Yeah, we're excited to talk today about digital ADA compliance. I know it's a big issue. Ken and I were talking before we got on that some articles are starting to circulate about folks kind of being behind the eight ball on this issue in some places. In some places, people have been talking about it for a while, but the tools and resources just uh, haven't been to the place they needed to be in order to do it at scale. So we're going to talk a little bit today about something that Rocket PD has been working on with ArtScan, a company called Accessibility on Demand in partnership with the Colorado BOCES Association and Ken and the team that we think can really help lighten the load for folks, that we think will provide a solution that will allow Colorado districts to do some of this ADA digital document compliance work at scale, and that we think will give a solution that will give folks some peace of mind, not only for the stuff that they need to make compliant for the deadline, but as they move forward, just really thinking about something I think we've always thought about, which is how to make documents accessible for all students, all teachers, all staff. I think that's always been a goal of school districts. Certainly, we want to make sure that everybody has access to those documents. I was telling Ken, I have a personal interest in this because I'm someone with cerebral palsy. And when I grew up in the public school system, this was in Maryland, in Howard County, Maryland. I had a great, just a wonderful public school experience, and I had a lot of folks who really thought outside the box about my needs and how I would access documents or how I would access. In my case, it was a lot of like physical access to buildings and stairs and things like that. And I was very fortunate to have a supportive group of people around me. And I think about that often as I run into issues like this and I run into things that are happening. It's easy for me to sort of put myself in those shoes because I was at a point in different parts of my life where I didn't have access to the things I need. And the school districts that I went to really supported me in those areas. And so I've always looked fondly back on those memories and really appreciated that. So as we get into this, let's just talk a little bit about this issue. Why is it an issue now? Again, Ken, this is something that's been on everybody's radar, I think, to some degree for a while. What's made it sort of given it some urgency is the new federal ADA digital accessibility rule. This impacts Colorado districts. I know this is something you have been watching. What have you been hearing from districts in Colorado?
Yeah, I think some districts have started down the road of remediating. Some are just aware. Some have made some compliance adjustments around their websites. But for the most part, I think a lot of districts just don't even know where they are. And they don't know what they don't know, which I think is the importance of this webinar today is one, kind of get a handle on, where the district is, how BOCES can support that in your region or around the state, quite honestly, and how we can provide professional development and access to this ArchScan software. So I think there's lots of opportunities here, but I think we're on the front edge of what probably needs to really start getting done quickly because there's a lot of deadlines approaching.
Yeah, someone shared an article again with me just before this call about folks being a little bit behind. And, there's a couple of factors here. You see the goal at the bottom of this slide, right? Reducing that risk that you mentioned, the litigation, just the workload for folks to do this. There's always been the ability to manually remediate documents. I think if you've ever been involved in that work, you know just how tedious it can be. You know how much time it can take. And then, of course, the cost relative to this. There are so many documents, and it's funny as we've been doing this work, Ken, we'll do these cursory scans, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second of districts to see kind of like give us a litmus of where they are. And what we're seeing in general is like, 30 to 40% of the documents that we can see, typically fail. And if you figure we're only looking at the things that we can scrape from your front-facing website, how many more documents are we talking about? So, something to keep in mind. What the rule requires, again, websites, PDFs, mobile apps, they've all got to meet that WCAG 2.1 level 2 standard. This has been widely published. If you're not familiar with that standard, there's a lot of documentation out there where you can read more about it. We can send you more about those standards. This applies to all sorts of stuff, friends. I mean, board materials, that's a big one, right? Public board meetings. And I know that we do a lot of work with the Colorado Association of School Boards. That's how we got connected initially. And we talked to Jubal Yenny and the folks there about this, policies, the special education documents that I mentioned earlier. Public communications is a big issue. And so, you can kind of go on down the list. There is a whole gamut of things that are up on websites that probably need to some eyes on, right? That we probably need to think about, are these accessible to a level that meets that standard, and are districts in a position to remediate them if not? Again, Ken, this work is ongoing, right? It's not a one-time project. I think what you'll hear us talk about is, what do you need to get started? And then having something that you can rely on as new things come up, because people are always adding documents to their websites, right?
Yeah, and I think, those front-facing aspects of a website or what you're putting out to the public quite regularly are things we're going to start with. Those are the things that we can attack pretty quickly, and then we can dig in deeper, through a deeper scan, not just the website, but into files that we use sometimes. Maybe it's, with schools, we have a lot of, year timely type things that need to go out. Well, you don't even really think about those till you get closer to that date. So, I think this is a great opportunity. I think just even knowledge about the standards and what the actual compliance is, I think is going to be huge for a lot of our systems, and that's where I think BOCES are going to help support that.
Cool. So I wrote up here, right? Colorado districts are on the clock. I mean, that really is true for districts all across the country. And again, we talked about the fact that some folks have been closely monitoring this. Many districts that I talked to in Colorado are actually probably a little bit ahead of the game, because I've heard of this issue in Colorado in my travels there over the last year. And I know folks are paying attention. There are others who are just learning about it. And I think either way, when you look at these deadlines, right, if your population is 50,000 or more, that April 24th, 2026 deadline is fast approaching. And again, that's population. So that's not necessarily just students or staff, right? But the population of your community. I think what I always recommend to people is, you say, where do I fit in this camp? I'd probably ask your legal team or your district team about where you fit, just to make sure you know about how much time you have. But it's going to be somewhere in the window that you see up here on the screen. Starting early prevents expensive last minute remediation. I think we've seen this. I was at the CASB event, Ken, where I saw you in December, and someone mentioned that they had already received a letter from, a lawyer about this issue. And I think some other letters were circulating in the state there. I know in other states I've talked to. So again, getting out in front of this stuff can be helpful for a lot of reasons. Did you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, well, we know, most people on this call know there are some litigious folks in Colorado who take advantage of these kind of situations, and what we're trying to do is get ahead of that, so you don't have somebody actually sending a letter demanding, essentially a payout. So what we're trying to do is make sure everybody's at least headed down the right road to get everything remediated as best they can and be in compliance. I would agree with you. I mean, part of this is reaching out to your own legal team to be able to, talk about this. And we also need to recognize a lot of our districts in the state are super small, so they don't have a lot of people to really do this work. That's why we're here today, to talk about, one, how BOCES can support, and two, really how simplistic this is once you kind of get a little bit of a handle on it. So it's exciting stuff.
Yeah, I told Ken, I think of it as like a printer that you would put in your office, or a vending machine in a lot of ways. This is not a big, heavy SaaS implementation that you're going to see. It really is a portal that you can use and access and sort of pay with credits, right, as you go. And so, again, not something that's going to be really taxing on your existing technology infrastructure, but something that hopefully is going to give you some options quickly to get some of this work done, so you can avoid some of that potential litigation, or, further down from that, just making sure these documents are accessible when people ask for them. All right, so I think we mentioned, like, intent isn't really the problem, Ken. I think we all agree we want these documents to be accessible. People have been doing this work for a long time, but capacity, gosh, we talked about thousands of legacy PDFs. Like I wake up at night thinking about this. There's so many sometimes, right? Like limited staff time and limited accessibility expertise. I think you're lucky if you have someone on your team who has that deep accessibility expertise and could actually manually remediate these documents. Often they have to be farmed out to a team. That team would have to go and do them. That process is expensive for sure. It also takes a little bit of time. So, in the event that someone asks for something, if it's taking 3 weeks, sometimes 3 months to get those documents back, a lot can happen in that time. Parents can become upset, students can fall behind, teachers can get frustrated because they can't get students the documentation that they need. And so by shrinking that window of time to delivery, we're not only, reducing risk, but we're also making sure people can get access to these documents when they need them. And what we're talking about, friends, is really a conversion that takes place in a matter of minutes, as opposed to a matter of hours and in some cases days. And again, we've even seen weeks and months. So again, that manual remediation is slow. It is very hard to sustain when you're talking about the number of documents that we're all looking at. Ken, do you have anything to add, relative to that work and sort of what the BOCES is hoping to accomplish through some of the training it'll be offering?
Yeah, I guess the thing I'd add is, as a former superintendent, this really isn't, your number one focus, but it is definitely a priority. So, having that extra team through BOCES, at CBA, to really be able to support the work at a district level, where then the superintendent can actually focus on other things. Because quite frankly, we have plenty of districts where the superintendent is the principal. They have plenty of jobs to do. So let's take this off the plate and help them make that happen. So it's an opportunity right now, and I think it's something we need to get in front of. So yeah, good stuff.
So everybody's wearing a lot of hats, right? And, again, we mentioned there are some risks of kind of waiting. I think some districts have played this game, right? If they're not already, this notion of like, well, maybe I'll just wait to see if a lawsuit comes and I'll see what the cost of that is going to be. And quite frankly, when manual remediation was the only option, I could see why districts might play that game. But the reality now, and particularly with the legislation that's been passed, is that there's going to probably be more litigation. The beauty is that there are solutions that can get you out in front of this thing so that you're not kind of playing that game of like, let's just see if someone sues us, but let's get out in front of this and let's show our community that we're out in front of this, which I think is really important. So again, settlements and legal costs can quickly become unbudgeted expenses. Inaccessible documents block access for families and students. I mentioned some of this. I wrote down a stat. I think it's on the next slide. I'll share it with you. But I saw that OCR complaints had tripled nationally since 2024. And I also read that 40% of those complaints are ADA related. I think I saw I'm going to see if I got this number right. 8,457 complaints, ADA related OCR complaints in 2024 alone to districts. So, if you go back even a few years, those numbers were not nearly as high. You're starting to see these things come, and people are asking, like, what can we do so that we don't find ourselves sort of in the crosshairs? So the work is ongoing, right? Again, Ken mentioned this is not a one-time project. You're going to want to get that front-facing stuff done first and fast and first. But then there's all this other stuff that comes as teachers add new documents, as board add new documents, as parents add new documents. You're creating these documents every day, sometimes like every minute or every hour. And so it really is a lot of stuff. Traditional workflows have to evolve to meet those needs. Okay, so what are we looking at, Ken? This is the solution. This is what the BOCES has, kind of engaged with Rocket PD and ArtScan and our technology partners, AOD, to do. For those of you that aren't familiar with Rocket PD, we've really been working to build a community and to surface these ideas and issues as they come up in places that we operate, such as in Colorado through our partnership with the Colorado BOCES and the Colorado Association of School Boards. And what we'll often do is once we hear about a challenge, such as this one, we'll go out and try to find a partner who we think can match that need and hopefully support it. And we think we found that in Arch Scan and accessibility on demand. We showed this thing to Ken. I know he was really excited about it. Ken, before I dive into kind of how this works, I'll let you talk a little bit about just why you thought this would be the solution.
Yeah, so definitely one of the things that BOCES offers is, I mean, we have direct programming that we do for a lot of our school districts, but also the things we kind of do in the background to really help out, whether that's advocacy at the state level or different programs we're offering. And this is one of those things that was like a real aha that, we can offer this statewide, and you don't have to belong to a BOCES to be able to access this. So you may be unaffiliated with the BOCES, but if you need this work, we have numbers to call. We have emails you can send to and help you get this started. So for us, being across the entire state with BOCES organizations, we really see that this is an avenue for districts everywhere to be able to utilize this technology and the support to really make a difference and get ahead of the game. And kind of back to the previous comment, Corey, is these are the type of things that we're going to have to build into people's workflows. It's going to have to be a natural part of when you're developing, whether it's a 504 or an IEP, any documentation that's going out, that you utilize this to make sure it's compliant. And the world hates more regulations, but the regulations exist for a reason, and that reason is so people that have ADA issues can have access. So we're excited about it at the BOCES level. We're really excited about getting people up and running. We know this is a kind of a shift in paradigm for a lot of folks, but we're here to help. And you guys are Rocket PDs on board, so we're really excited about this opportunity.
Well, thanks for saying that, Ken. And I'll just real quickly talk a little about for those that aren't familiar with this work or the platform, how it works. I told Ken, I used to be a journalist. I was an educational technology journalist for many years before I got into forming Rocket PD. And I thought I had seen every product under the sun. As AI has evolved in the last couple of years, the things that have come out have really been eye-opening, even for someone who's been in the field for as long as I have. This one in particular really resonated with me, as I said, because I have a close association to accessibility through my own physical disability. I remember not necessarily having access to certain things, and I remember the teachers and staff who were helping me really going out of their way to support me. And so I think about that often. What I understand about this and why I like it so much is that it is this philosophy of automation first, right? We're not necessarily saying in any capacity that you should go out there and rely first on AI and only on AI. I think what we're saying is when we see the amount of work that school districts have to do and that staff have to do when it comes to document remediation and document accessibility, it is it's mind-boggling and it's frustrating. And I think that what this does is say, take 95% of your documentation, automate it first, meaning run it through, get it done so that you can see the delta, what's left on that 5% or so, and decide if you want to take that further or if you've gone far enough. And what this does is really allow you to spend time on the things that really are going to need to spend time on, right? Some of those classroom type documents, some of those other things that maybe you need to go a little bit deeper on. I mentioned to Ken, what's cool about this is imagine a portal that you just log into and you're able to upload batches of documents. You just click a button to upload them. The conversion takes place in a matter of minutes. You get the documentation back converted, but you also get in another column a link to a report that tells you exactly to the standard that the document was converted. Normally, you're going to see documentation coming up in the 92 to 97% frame, which with WCAG standards. So most people are going to say, well, that's pretty good. That's probably good enough in 99% of the cases. And to have that report that goes with it, so your school district can show folks, not only have we made a good faith attempt to do this, but we've done it to this percentage. We have a report that shows that. If you'd like to go further, manual remediation or another tier of automated remediation is available to you. So you can do that and you can agree to that, and then you can spend, a few more tokens or whatever it might be on that process. That way you're doing that remediation first, getting the lion's share out of the way, You're having some conversations with folks about do we need to go deeper on a small batch? And then you're deciding how far or how deep do we need to go, and what will the cost of that be? So, how does it work, right? So again, you just scan your documents. It's pretty quick. I watched them do this in like a matter of minutes, and we'll send out. I'm not going to do a demo on the call here, but we'll send out in a link after the fact, like a 2 minute demo that you can watch, where you can actually see just about how quickly this happens. And then I know the BOCES is offering some training as well for districts who want to do this. So if you want to do this, it is available to you. The scan happens pretty quickly. The fixes happen almost immediately with the scan, which is pretty cool. You're going to see that automated tagging. You're going to hear that reading order, the alt text, all of that stuff, the edge cases, that stuff that if you've ever done manual remediation, can take hours to do. It's quite remarkable, in fact, how quickly this works. And again, then you're going to prove it, right? Those compliance reports that I mentioned, having that peace of mind that not only has this happened, but it's happened to a standard and a level of care that I can document and that I can share. So, Ken, can you tell me a little bit just again about that piece, the documentation and having that and why that's so important?
Yeah, I would say a critical aspect is when a lawyer calls you up and is representing a client and says, we have an expectation of this, and this remediation around these documents, this is going to be a game changer for folks. They're going to be able to pull this document, send it in, probably from their attorney, or probably actually who will send it in, but to really say we've not only met compliance, but we've even got beyond that. So if it does take manual remediation, there's a way to do that. But I think this is certainly going to take care, like you said, 99% of every one of these conversations, to make sure, districts are doing what they need to do to be compliant, but also to really think about what we're doing for students. So like, are we really meeting their needs? Because as many know, BOCES, I mean, one of our main forays is actually around special ed. So we want to do this work. We want to do it right. So this is a tool for us to really make sure we're doing the right thing for kids and meeting compliance at the same time.
And Ken's talking a little bit about the training and sort of what I put at the bottom here, which is the human in the loop. This isn't about simply just having a machine to do, right? It's about giving the humans who are in charge of this work and who have been charged with making documents accessible for students the tools that they need to be effective. My friend, Jean-Claude Brizard is the CEO of Digital Promise, if you know that organization, talks often about this idea of the human in the loop and how this is where AI and the evolving tools can be really impactful is when they use the human in the loop in order to make that human more effective at their job and with their own judgment. And so I think this does that. I'm really pleased to see it working in that way. So Ken, let's talk a little bit about how districts get started with this, right? We wanted sort of a low lift, sort of low risk way for people to even say like, all right, I'm leaning into this. I like the idea of it for sure because I know it's going to save me time, but will it really work? And so, we talked about, well, how can we show people that this thing works pretty good? Well, and then you'll see a QR code at the end of this, right? We're going to give everybody on the call and everybody in Colorado 100 free credits to go and try this thing for yourself. All you've got to do is sign up to start your account. You don't need to put any money into it. You simply get the 100 free credits. We're going to go and we can go and scan your site if you'd like and do a readiness report so we can see again, we can't see all the documents. But we can see the things that are front facing and we can let you know based on what we've seen about where we think you're probably net out at. You can opt into this BOCES affiliate agreement through Ken and the team, and then we can give you a brief demo of this thing using your own documents so you can see exactly how it works. And once you've decided that this is or isn't the thing, hopefully you decide that it is, we can kind of come up with a timeline and a cost plan based on what we're seeing. Ken said you don't need to do everything at once, and we would not ask people to do that. I think we're going to look at the things that you have the most immediate need for, and we're going to recommend credits based on that. What's cool about the credits and why I like this, again, it's not SaaS, and I know a lot of school districts kind of roll their eyes about SaaS, Ken, because like we all have 150 apps that we don't probably use and we're paying for. The cool thing about AI and particularly this solution is it's tokenized, right? And so the credits never expire. You kind of pay as you go. So to me, that was a no-brainer when I heard about this. And again, our friends at the BOCES are going to provide that ongoing training and that professional support. Did you want to mention anything at all about the training in particular, Ken?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're really looking at a trainer models, so we can help support regional BOCES, and we can do that state level down to regional BOCES and support in district. So if folks want to get somebody in their district trained up to be able to do this work, we're happy to do that. If they don't have the capacity to do that, we want to help them at the BOCES level to be able to take care of that. I think the thing for me on here, if I was sitting in a superintendent seat right now, I would love a readiness report to know where my district is, where kind of what's the long-term plan for this to make sure we're in compliance and staying out of trouble. So to me, if I was a superintendent, I'd be jumping on this thing tomorrow to kind of figure out where I am. So
Okay, so just to kind of reiterate some of this stuff, right? What's the benefit of all this, right? I wrote compliance without overloading staff. We have to be compliant. We have to at least make that good faith effort, and then beyond that, there's sort of this moral obligation that we talked about. I think we all want to have a certain level of accessibility within our districts, but staff are overloaded, quite frankly. You mentioned some of these districts are smaller. They don't necessarily have the big teams. We can start with eliminating that backlog, that stuff that needs to get done. We can do sort of this continuous monitoring, right? Keeping compliance current, making sure that once we get to that level, we can kind of stay there, which is pretty cool. And then again, the reports, right, that you can use not only for your team or when a lawyer calls, but you can also have these reports to share with your board and your audit review and different things like that. People might want to know, like, how are we doing with this? Well, now you can't just say, "Well, I think we're doing all right," which I think is what happens. I've heard that before. Like, I think the team that hosts our website is dealing with this. Right. I think the company that built our, whatever infrastructure is dealing with this. But now it's like we can have the reporting to show that we can see how documents have been converted into what standard. So again, compliance, but also, a little CYA. Okay, so Ken, start where it matters most, right? Like you've taken a look at some of this stuff. Any thoughts on just some of the documents that you would recommend that folks kind of start with?
well, yeah, you have them listed. SPED is the most litigious part of what any educational system does. I would start there, and then probably the most front-facing are board minutes, newsletters, things that are going out to the public on a very frequent basis. I think looking at those things right off the bat would be good, and then any major policies you have that you're kind of every year we reconfigure policies in school districts. I think making sure those are compliant are all great places to start. Then you can start digging in from there. And like you said, I mean, even small systems have literally probably hundreds of thousands of documents. So you don't have to get it all done at once, but I think any of these things that are right there, readily available to the public almost at any given time, you want to make sure those are compliant to begin with. Then we can go from there. I think it's a great stepping stone into really thinking down the road and how you're going to support this with a real workflow that's going to matter on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, and I think if like, this notion of this deadline is creeping up and this idea of, oh, all of these documents is sort of washing over you, take a step back, take a breath. You don't have to do everything at once. I think with the way Ken and the team has set this up, you really are able to take a look at what needs to get done to get you to a certain level. And then as you scale beyond that, having a tool really at your ready, like I said, like a vending machine or a printer in your office that you can just load tokens into and get results out of, is the way to think about it. Okay, so just a couple of things here, like depending on the level of conversion or remediation that you need, somewhere between 30 cents. This can go all the way up to $8 a page if you're really doing that deep remediation. But again, with the automation first approach, what we're doing is looking at what can we do upfront to reduce those costs, to increase that efficiency so that where you need that deeper remediation, it makes sense to spend that extra money. This can all be done through the system, meaning you just add in additional tokens for additional levels. There's not something where you need to take it out and go somewhere else with it. You really can do everything within the portal. Again, flexible pricing by document type. And again, I mentioned this, pay for only for what you need, which I can't I can't stress enough. Having worked for so long in the ed tech space and watched all of these SaaS companies come through, just the eye roll that I used to get going into districts and talking to people about SaaS and, sort of what AI is now allowing for, which is this tokenized approach to how you use software. And I just think it's a really cool thing. Ken, anything to add here at all?
Yeah, I think when we first started talking, I think the conversation was really around probably 95% of the documents are going to be at that 30 cent level. They really are the majority of all of them. You're only really going to have to get to that $8 where there's a human actually digging into something very rarely. So I don't see that happening quite often at all, really. I really think it is at lower end cost. And I guess, for superintendents who are thinking about, man, how do I put this in my budget? Well, the other side of it is when you get sued, it's probably a $5,000 to $10,000 bill for not doing this. So just let's get on the front end of it and do that kind of work. I think ahead of time. And again, that pay as you go is huge. So
Yeah,
like you get your report and you look at it and it's like, well, we have 1,000 pages. We need to remediate immediately. That's a cost. Like exactly what that is. You can plan for that, and you're not really you don't have to think, well, I need to buy a $20,000 a year
right.
subscription to something. So yeah, I think this is a good model for folks to really be able to dig into.
Yeah, you can get started with a couple $1,000 just to get you going with the stuff that you need in most cases. And again, the scan will reveal about how much, we think you need to get that done, and you can kind of decide from there. And then when you think about it, like the cost of some of this stuff used to be upwards of like 30, $40 a page, even more for some of this documentation. So I was just pretty amazed when I saw that, just thinking about how far we've come in such a short period of time. And boy, do we need it because we do have this deadline coming up. Okay, so readiness scan and roadmaps. So in a second, I'm going to throw a QR code up on the screen. And of course, I'll also send an email out after the fact where you guys can do this if you want. But what we're going to do is, you'll get those 100 free credits. We can give you kind of a free cursory scan of all your public facing documents. We'll give you that readiness report. And then from it, we can kind of have a conversation about what's the prescription here. And again, on the low end, right? Like just to get you started to a threshold that you feel comfortable with the stuff that needs to get done. We don't need to do everything at once. This is a matter of starting the process. Again, the word roadmap makes sense, right? Like, how do we scale over time to get us where we need to go, and make sure that we're hitting those deadlines. Anything to add with that, Ken?
Yeah, I would just say if it were me and I was in a superintendent seat, I would take a couple things on my website. Like if you have a policy around, communication with the board, or if you have something on there, maybe even a board facing document. I start with that. I mean, do something simple and kind of see how it works and get a handle on the process. And I think you're going to see right away that this is really advantageous. So now you can apply it to a bigger scope. So yeah, I think this is where to start, and I think it's a great place for districts to be able to look at and see where they need to go next. So,
Okay, so our friends here at the Colorado BOCES, that have entered into this affiliate agreement to give all of the districts in Colorado access to this tool, and of course, you don't even need to be necessarily a Colorado district to get access. Again, the BOCES will also provide training and support as needed for districts. So, Ken, thank you for that. I know that anytime you can sit here and say that a technology is easy to use all you want. You guys are probably thinking that right now as I'm telling you this, and I swear it is. But you're going to want and need some of that training for your teams. You're going to want them to have peace of mind when they come into the system and they use it. Ken's team is here to provide that. So this isn't something that you're going to get and, we're going to say, here you go, off and run with it. That's why the BOCES is here. We are going to, generate again those compliance reports, and then you're going to be able to track all of this stuff almost in real time, which is pretty slick. All right, so start early, start small. Let's start together, right? We have this BOCES agreement in place. We've got a number of folks from Colorado who have signed on to this webinar today, probably because you're thinking about this deadline and wondering where you're at. Some of you are probably further ahead than others, but in all cases, we're thinking about the number of documents that we actually probably have to remediate and the amount of time that we have. I think we'll identify that backlog pretty quickly. We'll give you the 100 free credits on the next page just to test the automation for yourself. And then through Ken and the team, really build that plan for compliance over time. Cool. So I'm going to pop the QR code up here again. Like I said, 100 free credits. We can try it with your own documents. We're happy to get on the phone to give you a compliance report, or I should say a cursory scan of your documents and talk about sort of the prescription going forward based on what we see. Again, Rocket PD just wants to thank the Colorado BOCES for stepping in and offering this. Again, our goal at Rocket PD really is to listen to the needs of our partners, in particular in Colorado, to find out where there is a need and then to source solutions that can potentially meet that need. We think we've identified something that's really going to work well in Colorado through our partners at Accessibility on Demand and ArchScan. And Ken and the team really have sort of taken the first step to kind of put this deal together to make sure that districts can get access to it, to make sure that there's training so that people understand how to use it, and that we can just kind of get past this sort of like washing over of the documents and all the stuff we have to do and start now thinking about, okay, we have a plan, we have a tool, like let's start the work. And I think this will help us do that. So, great, Ken. Anything else to add about your work? Again, I'll leave the QR code up on the screen. I hope you guys have found this informative and useful. I'll send out an email after the fact, but Ken, I'll put it back to you before we sign off for folks.
No, thanks, Corey. I appreciate it, and I just appreciate everybody being here today and taking a little bit of time out of your lunch schedule, probably to sit and listen. And then really excited about this opportunity to support districts across Colorado and what we can do to help. So looking forward to talking to everybody down the road. And if you have questions, obviously reach out to either the BOCES or to Rocket PD or ArchScan. And I mean, we're all working hand in hand to get this solved for all across Colorado. So thanks again. I really appreciate it.